So our hymn today.
Wow, I love that hymn.
Oh, that reminds me.
Oh, I love this
Is all
hymn.
creatures of our garden king.
Who just said that? Did you just say that?
Maybe.
Me too. So the one last
Did
week
we
I
just
had
become best
no
friends?
idea
Yep.
what that song
I just saw
was.
Step Brothers.
Did you really?
Because I wasn't here last week.
Hey, by the way, I have watched it before.
I
Uh,
wasn't here, and I don't
There's so many stupid superhero movies.
remember which one it was, but he had brought me the paper, and I was like, I don't know.
There's this one Referent movie that's really
I
good.
don't remember what it was last week, but
None of
okay.
Did we already
No,
start?
there's one where like he
You're
He ends
supposed
up
to
living
have.
on the outside of his
None of you
house.
have yet.
I forget. It's like all the good things are leaving all the. I don't know. It's a really good movie.
Anyway,
Will Ferrell movies, you kind of just watch.
we're gonna sing "All Creatures of Our God and King," and it sounds like some of you know it, so that's good.
Are we gonna sing the traditional version of it, or are we gonna sing the?
Pretty traditional, or at least I think it's the traditional version, as far as I know.
What's the
Sing this
not
to me as a
modern
small child.
Yes.
There's a small black one.
So let's sing. Creatures of our God and King, lift up your voice and with us sing. Oh, praise Him, Hallelujah. Thou burning sun with golden beams, thou silver moon with softer gleam. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Thou rushing wind that art so strong, ye clouds that sail in heaven along. Oh, praise Him. Hallelujah. Thou rising moon in praise rejoice. Ye lights of evening find a voice. Oh, praise Him. Oh, praise Him. Hallelujah. 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 Thou flowing water pure and clear, make music for thy Lord to hear. Oh, praise Him, hallelujah. Thou fire so masterful and bright, that givest man both warmth and light. Oh, praise Him, oh, praise Him. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. And all ye men of tender heart, forgiving others, take your part. Oh, praise Him, hallelujah. Ye who long pain and sorrow bear, praise God and on Him cast your care. Oh, praise Him, oh, praise Him. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah.
with a capital S.
No, there's not two
Lowercase
H's.
s.
Who do you guys keep typing shit?
Uppercase
No, why?
S-O-U-T.
Oh.
Okay.
Hampton one.
Uh-huh. Okay.
P to the P in there.
Yeah, they got new
Like ham?
new Wi-Fi
Wait, what's the
with
one
weed
password?
infused with
Oh my gosh,
weed
you just
infused
said it like
cables.
5 times.
What does that mean?
Southampton.
They got
with a capital
They
S.
got
I
Google
didn't
Fiber.
spell. I didn't capital.
We got weed infused there.
I just said that.
What?
Cameron.
Like, what does that do?
You
Oh
literally
my
just
God.
took that from me.
Yes.
All right, so
Let's-
let's make sure we know what the hymnist is saying.
I don't want
Is it Mitchell?
Too bad.
to.
Too bad, me.
Life
try.
sometimes works that way. All creatures of our God and King, lift up your voice and with us sing. Translation?
Yeah.
Everybody, let's praise God.
Everybody, let's all
Praise
sing.
God.
Yeah.
Praise the Lord.
Oh, praise Him, Alleluia. What does Alleluia mean?
Praise the Lord.
I don't know
It's
this.
hallelujah, but
Like,
But not with the
Yeah, it means the exact same thing that Hallelujah means. What does Hallelujah mean?
like, isn't it
Praise
like,
be
it's
to the-
giving honor.
like rejoice,
Yeah is Yahweh.
praise.
Yeah,
But I don't know what the hallelujah.
praise Yahweh?
praise. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I
Praise the
said
Lord.
praise.
I
Didn't
didn't.
I say praise?
No one listens.
Praise Yahweh.
I said praise God.
Quiet,
Praise I am.
Thou burning sun with golden beams, thou silver moon with softer gleam. Oh, praise Him, oh, praise Him.
It's like the sun's pretty bright,
Star.
The moon's not as bright.
reflect his-
but
What?
Describing some of his creation.
He's telling the sun and the moon, you guys, praise Him too.
but he's
Yeah.
making a distinction. The sun is bright and the moon is not as bright.
That's
The moon
scribe.
has slightly softer gleams than the sun does, yes.
Yep.
Is it gleams or gleam?
It's
Where else
glams.
flames?
Beams and gleams. Got
That's
some
my
beams
head.
and gleams.
Thou rushing wind that art so strong, ye clouds that sail in heaven along. Oh, praise Him, hallelujah.
He's
Yes.
saying the moon's rise.
The moon doesn't do that.
The moon rises.
He's just saying everything
And,
praise.
like,
He said everything
He's-
praise Him, and now he's
he's-
listing all of the things.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Listing the things that praise him.
He's listing the things that he's telling to praise Him. Ye lights, ye moon, praise Him, find a voice, praise Him.
And then he says something.
Flowing water, pure and clear. Make music for the Lord to hear.
Yes.
He's still listening.
Water, praise Him. Thou fire, so masterful and bright, that givest man both warmth and light. Fire, praise Him. And he culminates, and all ye men of tender heart, forgiving others, take your part. Oh, praise Him. Ye who long pain and sorrow bear, praise God, and on Him cast your care. Oh, praise Him. So, man gets 2 stanzas. Everything else just got 1 line.
Dang.
That's because he breathed. He breathed life
He
into
breathed.
us. And others he just spoke.
breathed.
He was
life.
spiraled.
Yes.
And what does this line in particular say?
Ye who long for pain, long pain and sorrow bear. Don't care about the pain or the sorrow.
You people who are in pain and sorrow, still praise Him.
get over yourself. Praise Him.
Yeah.
Basically, you have no excuse.
And then he finishes up kind of with a similar thing that he starts with. Let all things their Creator bless, and worship Him in humbleness. Praise the Father, praise the Son, and praise the Spirit. 3 in 1. What doctrine is that? Dogma, I should say.
Trinitarian.
That'd be the dogma of the Trinity.
Yes.
Oh, praise Him, oh, praise Him, hallelujah.
Hey,
It's the
Clint.
Trinity.
This is for Benjamin.
Very straightforward song, making one particular point. What's the point?
Praise him.
Praise Him.
Praise God.
Or as some would say, praise the Lord.
Praise the Lord.
Is that actually what it says, though?
Yes.
2.
Yes, Joshua. Stupid for even asking that question.
I'm just making sure, because I feel like he didn't say anything.
2.
Nacho.
Nacho. You want to read along with me?
I mean, do I?
The script of nothing.
Back off.
You read, not listen.
Back
You're
off,
gonna
Jack.
tear it, and I'm gonna be mad.
Joshua David.
Yeah.
This inspiring expression of praise found in nearly every hymnal was originally written in 1225.
That's all.
That's old. By one of the most interesting figures in all of church history, Giovanni Bernardo.
He
Or
proved one of the
Bernardo.
most interesting.
Bernardone.
Is your
Bernardo.
Yeah, there
Bernardo.
you go. Who was better known as Saint Francis of Assisi.
Yes. He is better known as that.
He was a mystic, a medieval monk who spent his lifetime as an itinerant evangelist preaching and helping the poor people of Italy
That's it. Entrance.
And taking care of the animals.
and taking care of the animals.
Was that where CC's was created?
No. Saint Francis crazily enough, was born in Assisi, Italy, in 1182.
Internet evangelist.
St. Francis was a sissy.
St. Francis. He was a sissy. He was a sissy. How can we respect this guy? He was a sissy.
Sorry, I couldn't.
You give me no respect. We're neutral. He is a sissy.
St. Francis.
He's a sissy.
Sorry.
Good job.
Sorry for the distraction.
St. Francis was born in Italy in 1182.
Born of a sissy.
After an indulgent life as a soldier, he reformed his ways dramatically at the age of 25 and determined to serve God by imitating the selfless life of Christ in all that he did. Although his family were people of considerable means, meaning they were rich,
Yes.
Francis scorned the possessions of material goods, denounced his inherited wealth, denied himself everything but the most meager necessities, and devoted himself completely to moving about his area as Christ's representative. At the age of 28, Francis founded the influential Franciscan Order of Friars, which developed into a large movement of young men and some women who adopted his religious beliefs and ascetic lifestyle. Excuse me, have you guys ever heard of Franciscan friars?
Franciscan monks, Franciscan priests, Franciscan sisters, or nuns.
He's a big deal.
Yeah.
St. Francis is known as a great lover of nature, seeing the hand of God in all creation. You might have noticed that in this song. One of the well-known master paintings of this time was done by the famous Italian artist Giotto and shows St. Francis feeding the birds. The following well-known verse was written in tribute to this man. St. Francis came to preach. With smiles he met the friendless, fed the poor, freed the trapped bird, led a child home. Although he spoke no word, his text, God's love, the town did not forget.
Wait, what does that mean? You spoke no word, his text?
His text, God's love was his text.
Oh.
He didn't speak words because God's text.
So is
was
it
his
capital
love.
H his text?
Wait, so he didn't speak?
Well, St. Francis's text would have been God's love.
Oh,
St.
so
Francis is, well, no, I mean, he just wasn't a bit big on
He showed
preaching
love.
with words.
Love is a verb.
He's
Oh.
famously noted for that phrase that I think is kind of silly, but many people know and enjoy.
Witness all the time, and when necessary, use word.
There you go. That's from Francis of Assisi. All creatures of our God and King is from one of St. Francis's writings entitled Canticles of the Sun. Said to have been written one hot summer day in 1225, 1 year before his death, while Francis was very ill and suffering the loss of his eyesight. Throughout his life, St. Francis made much use of singing and believed strongly in the importance of church music. In all, he wrote more than 60 hymns for use in the monastery. The English translation of this text was made by William Draper, a village rector in England, who prepared this paraphrased version of for a child's choir festival at some time between 1899 and 1919. The tune for this text first appeared in a Roman Catholic hymnal in Cologne, Germany, 1623. After being forgotten for a time, the tune was revived in the 20th century and appeared in the English hymnal published in 1906. An interesting congregational use of this hymn is to sing it at 2 or 3 or 4 part round or canon. Meaning like, let all things their creator, let all things their creator, and you're singing on top of each other.
Hey, that's cool. We should try that.
We should try
Yeah.
that after our concert.
Although there is much that is difficult to understand and explain about the author of this text, we certainly can be thankful that God ordained the birth, translation, and preservation of the fine expression of praise for his people to enjoy, even to the present time.
There's also I don't know if this is true, but the tradition also holds that at one point he needed surgery of some kind, and of course back then they knocked you out with like ether or something, and he refused the ether because he didn't want to be under any kind of influence. And so he tried to have the surgery without being put to sleep, and he ended up passing out from the pain. Did you hear that?
I had, yeah.
So
There's quite a few like legends and things
I don't know if
surrounding
it's true, it's
Francis
a
of Assisi.
tradition, I guess.
That one sounds pretty reasonable. It sounds quite likely. There's other more
But that
slightly
he-
fantastic ones.
But that he passed out?
Yeah, he
Yeah.
passed out from the pain.
It's probably because
Well, it hurt like poo-poo.
Sometimes poo-poo does good.
So what we're doing for 5 of the next 6 weeks is going through the different texts that we'll be studying in VBS with our kiddos and Riggins. So the first one is Exodus 2, 1 through 10. They essentially just pull out a couple stories that have to do with water. Basically, that's since the theme for VBS is the river rafting thing. They just pulled out stories from the Bible that relate to water. So you got like Moses and the basket and the bulrushes, the crossing of the Jordan. I think Peter walking on water is one. I might be wrong about that.
Probably.
Naaman being healed in the river, and then Jesus' baptism. So we're going to just go through each text and study it in quite a bit of depth so that all of you know exactly what the text says and can better help your kids understand it. And hopefully you'll learn something that you didn't already yet know.
It's okay, Denise.
Because we'll study it with our usual
Do you know how punch
fervor.
runs?
Wait, you have a hole punch there? Wow.
I'll open yours too.
No.
Anyone? I like to punch people.
And we know, I know.
You don't live with her, Joshua.
That doesn't matter.
Hey, Leah, you should caress his head with your feet.
Now
Like
just do
grab
a
a couple
sneaky.
hairs in between your toes and like go like this.
That's gross.
Hey,
That's gross.
and I totally haven't had shoes on since in the past like 2 hours. So I just came here barefoot. So
Nice.
get all that on the bottom of my feet too.
It's not a big deal.
Yeah. This is not that bad.
So, Exodus 2, verses 1 through 10. You want to turn to Exodus in your Bibles? That would be appropriate.
Where's our food?
Technically, this is 13 is like
Exodus is the second book in the Bible.
You got 2 holes.
So we're going to the second chapter of the second book in the Bible.
right after.
When we get to the second verse, the deuces will be a baseball reference. No.
She
I
became
didn't hear what you said.
Sorry, Denise is.
Say it again.
I said when we get to the second verse, the deuces will be a.
That would be.
So when you have 2
Tennis.
strikes, 2 balls, and 2 outs.
That's not tennis.
Deuces are up, deuces are
You're
wild.
wrong.
That
But
deuce was
that's
a
okay.
term.
I
I don't like it because I don't watch it.
It's also a term in tennis.
I watch it when
Means
I'm
you're up by
there.
2.
It's also a term my dad uses.
It's a term of reference to describe. It's probably the same thing.
So we're studying Exodus chapter 2, verses 1 through 10. Shock and awe right here. I'm gonna blow your brains for a second. What comes before Exodus 2 is Exodus 1.
No!
Whoa.
Yeah.
This is news to me.
We know, Joshua, not everybody can be as
Disagreement.
smart as-
This is one continuous story, starting in Genesis 1 and ending in Revelation 21. So
Oh my god.
What's the picture mean?
It's a basket.
it's a basket.
You're
Those
a
are a
dog.
bunch of
Have you
little,
these baskets before, Cameron?
I've actually knew that before.
Hey.
So to understand the context, we're going to make sure we know we need to know what happened from Genesis 1 through Exodus 1 so that we can better understand Exodus 2. So we'll briefly go over the context and then we'll just break it down verse by verse and make sure we understand what's going on in this story, how it contributes to the flow of the narrative, and what the point is. Why is it here? Sound good?
I know.
Do basic Bible study methods. And
Read.
you learn by doing.
Oh my gosh.
Read.
Joshua,
Read.
don't
Examine,
even,
apply,
just
right.
don't even, just stop.
I always started with a P too.
To start with, the context. Walk me through the basic storyline of Genesis.
So,
So like there's this guy.
Noah, Abraham,
In the beginning,
family greater than Egypt.
Family goes to Egypt, isn't that
you
right?
need the little dash before the thing. Otherwise, it looks like family's greater than Egypt.
Yeah, when I did that, Egypt was the second line.
The family is greater than Egypt.
Technically, it's right though,
Oh.
because their family did end up
Okay.
getting bigger.
Egypt is
Their
their
family,
family. Stephen.
their family did become greater than Egypt,
What's
though.
his name?
So you got creation. What happens in creation? What is the conflict that introduces this story? What is the conflict of this whole story? Is
Sin.
revolving around?
Smack.
Okay. Sin, and as a result of sin,
Death.
death. And what's promised right away?
The seed.
The seed. And all this book, we're looking for the seed. And if you're reading Genesis, you're realizing that's repeated over and over and over again. The woman conceived and bore a son, and we're like, is this the guy? Is this the guy who's going the seed who was promised in Genesis 3:15? So we get moving along. We're asking this basically of every major character that comes along. Noah, no. Get to Abraham. Abraham gets more clarity on the promise, right? He's going to have land, seed, blessing. Bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you.
Okay, you guys are distracting me.
And then his descendants.
Y'all need to just shit it.
He's promised to have a son by Sarah, and he's going to have descendants like the sand on the shore of the sea. He has a son named
Isaac.
Isaac. Isaac has a son named
Joseph.
Jacob and Esau, both.
Oh, never mind.
Jacob is the one that the promise is passed on to, right? We follow Jacob. He has 12 sons.
Benjamin's Israel.
Benjamin's one of them.
That's with Joseph.
Anybody know the 12 sons?
of
Oh, I used to know.
Reuben, Benjamin,
Benjamin,
Naphtali.
Naphtali.
Manasseh was Joseph's son.
Yeah.
Isaac,
Simeon.
Dan,
Asher?
Levi.
Levi.
Gad.
Oh. Gad.
Reuben, Simeon.
If you have Exodus 1 up,
Judah, Issachar,
if you have Exodus 1 up,
Zebulun,
Reuben, Benjamin, Dan, and Naphtali, Gad, and Asher.
yeah.
You can write a song.
Now,
12.
notice, I'm going to see if any of you know this. You see the list in Genesis 1, verse 2.
Genesis?
Excuse me, Exodus 1, verse 2. The list of names.
Uh-huh.
What order is that list of names in?
What order? What?
What order is that list of names in?
I don't know. When they were born, chronological. Reuben was the first.
No, because
No,
Benjamin's not the
no, it's
last
not-
one.
it's not chronological.
Yes. I didn't.
Yeah, right.
Pay attention, mother.
I just saw Reuben. I didn't
It's
get
in
that
order
far.
of,
You make me happy if you guys figure this out.
whatever you call it.
And then
I think I know. I can guess.
is it in alphabetical order for the Hebrew?
In order of,
But eventually he became second.
Would you stop?
we're writing a song.
Shut up.
Well, do it on your own time.
The stuff.
Yeah.
In order of their age, but according to their moms.
In order of age according to their mother. That's correct. So who's the first? Who is Jacob's true wife? His first wife.
Yeah.
The wife who is
The one
he is one
didn't
flesh with. Leah, the one he didn't want. But the one he eventually, when he dies, he has to be buried with her. He finally gets it. He understands this is the wife of my flesh, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. This relation that was established in Genesis chapter 2, I have this with Leah, not with Rachel. She is his true wife.
Or the two
Bummer.
maids.
And the two maids follow, yeah. So that's why Leah's kids are first. And that's why we're following. If you see the right to rule is passed down to you, we can get into that. But that's sidetracked. But so we start with Leah's kids, then we follow the second wife's
Isn't it Rachel's?
Leah's kids, then Rachel's kids,
No.
except
I
for
thought it was Rachel's maid's kids, and then
yeah. But
Leah's kids.
in this list, you have Leah's
okay.
kids, and then Rachel's kids less Joseph, who isn't listed, and then you have Bilhah's kids, and then what's her name?
I thought Benjamin and
Benjamin.
Joseph
Rachel.
were
Rachel's
the only two that were Rachel's.
Yeah.
Oh.
So you have Leah's kids first: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun.
Okay, got it. And then Benjamin.
Then Benjamin, who's Rachel's. Dan and Naphtali were Bilhah's, and I forget the fourth woman's name. Gad and Asher.
He knows.
Women.
Only.
But that's aside. Anyway, that's totally irrelevant to the point. What I'm getting at. The kids, where are they? Where is everybody living? Egypt. Joseph died. All his brothers and all their generation. Everybody dies. Verse 7, but the people of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly. They multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, so that the land was filled with them. So we're living in Egypt. The nation of Israel is growing, being filled with Israelites. And verse 8, now there arose a new king over Egypt. So somebody want to read chapter 1, verses 8 through 14?
Me?
Zilpah.
Zilpah.
I just looked it up.
Then a good king who did not know about Joseph came to power over Egypt. He said to his people, look at the Israelite people, more numerous and stronger than we are. Come, let us deal wisely with them. Otherwise, they will continue to multiply, and if a war breaks out, they will ally themselves with our enemies and fight against us and leave the country. So they will put foremen over the Israelites to oppress them with hard labor. As a result, they built Pithom and Ramses as store cities for Pharaoh. But the more the Egyptians oppressed them, the more they multiplied and spread. As a result, the Egyptians loathed the Israelites, and they made the Israelites serve rigorously. Where was it to?
14.
14. They made their lives bitter by hard service with mortar and bricks, and by all kinds of service in the fields. Every kind of service the Israelites were required to give was rigorous.
All right, so what's happened?
Put into slavery.
The Israelites were multiplying rapidly.
Yeah,
they
so
thought
they
were gonna
multiplied
rise up.
rapidly, but
Let's
then
suppress
the Pharaoh forgot about what Jacob did and forgot about the other Pharaoh's promise to Jacob, and so he enslaved all
Joseph, but yeah.
Joseph.
So enslaves them all, makes them all do hard labor.
Yeah.
And then there's one particular line that lots of preachers like to sit on, and it's valid to sit on it. The more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied. So in their affliction, they grew and were strengthened. That theme translates throughout the entire text into the church age, when we see persecution strengthens the church.
It's like when you step on a spider with a bunch of babies.
We have a story about the midwives. Somebody want to summarize for me what the midwives do with Pharaoh and all that?
So the midwife,
Clint has it.
please.
Oh my gosh. So the midwives disobeyed Pharaoh.
The midwives disobeyed Pharaoh
And
because what did he tell them to
he
do?
told them
Told them to
any
kill the
boy
babies.
child born
Any boy or child born of the Hebrews,
to throw them out, to kill
And he
them.
Kill
killed him.
Kill
So then he found out that the midwives did not do it, and they said, well, the Hebrew women are too strong, and they have their babies before we can get to them.
so the midwives lie to Pharaoh,
And then God blessed them, and they had families.
and God bless them, and they have families.
That's how it works. When you don't kill babies, you have families of your own.
Yeah. So again, another verse where you could get sidetracked and talk a whole lot about, is it always wrong to lie? Obviously, the midwives lie, but God approves of their lie to Pharaoh to spare the babies.
So
of
does
Israel.
God lie?
We talked about this.
No.
No.
We're not going to talk about that today, but
Well, but it,
here's
but-
another thing you could
No.
place you could go. What?
I was just going to say that they feared the Lord over Pharaoh. It's very specific that it says they feared God, and they did not. They went against the law.
Okay.
So I missed that part. Sorry.
I agree. That's something that should always come into your discussion when you're having that "is it always wrong to lie" discussion. If you're going to say sometimes it's okay to lie, there's only one example or only one reason that people lie and it's good in the Bible.
Because they fear God more than they fear people.
Man.
Then they fear their own persecution.
And Pharaoh so they get all that, and then verse 22 sums up the result after the midwives do this and they have families. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, every son that is born to the Hebrews, you shall cast them into the Nile, throw them into the Nile.
I feel like they're more like pushing them.
Who's
No,
gonna
they're
work
lightly
I'm
like
confused.
setting them, and that dude let go. And
Wait a second. Wait a second.
He's like,
Look at that soldier.
So he enslaved everybody, and then was like, "Hey, so kill all the boys, let the women live." So who was gonna work? Were the
Yeah, that's the
women
thing.
in the war?
They were getting so strong and big and powerful. He's thinking, I don't need more
They're
slaves.
trying to weed them out.
But if they have more sons, they're going to raise up and have a revolt. So
He didn't think that
The
through.
king's like,
Yeah.
he probably would have gone in 5 years when people started dying off. He's like, okay, your kids can live again. We need more slaves. Kind of a thing.
Temporary fix.
Yeah.
Like duct tape.
So in the timeline, we're right here. You with me? Exodus hasn't happened yet.
yes.
We're here in the slavery part. Right. Okay. Now we're into our text, chapter 2, verse 1. Now a man from the house of Levi went and took his wife, a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw that he was a fine child, I hate the way they translate that, but we'll get to that. She hid him 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she took for him a basket made of bulrushes, or reeds, dabbed it with bitumen and pitch. Bitumen.
Hey, it's okay.
Come here, Benjamin.
I'm gonna dab you. I'm gonna dab this basket in
She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds by the riverbank, and his sister stood at a distance to know what would be done to him. Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, while her young women walked beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds, and sent her servant woman, and she took it. When she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby was crying. She took pity on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call you a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse your child for you?" Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." So the girl went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away, nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him. When the child grew older, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moshe, because she said, "I drew him out of the water. I mashad him from the water."
Wait, so who? Sorry. So who was the person that was persecuting all the babies?
Pharaoh.
And Pharaoh found the baby in the water.
Pharaoh's daughter found the baby in the water.
And then he was like, he didn't want to kill it, or
Well, they
She didn't tell
tell
Pharaoh.
Pharaoh
that-
it was Hebrew.
oh, like he did. So this whole entire interaction, Pharaoh was.
Exactly, yeah. It's
Oh.
secret.
She's Pharaoh's
Oh,
and
okay.
she's a daughter. So
So
What?
Yeah, that's exactly what I
start with. We're gonna drill down deep in this. So begin with the first information that they give. A man from the house of Levi took as his wife a Levite woman, and so that should make you, as if you've been reading this story, you should think, when was the last time we saw the house of Levi, and what was going on there? The last thing that happened in the house of Levi was Jacob, as he's dying, blessing all of his sons individually, right? Remember that? Genesis 49 and 50? So let's go look at what Jacob says to Levi and what we should expect from Levites. That'd be 49 verses 5 through 8. May I read that for me? 5 through 8?
49, 5. Oh, go ahead. There.
Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their swords are weapons of violence. Let me not enter their council. Let me not join their assembly. For they have killed men in their anger and hamstrung oxen as they pleased. Cursed be their anger, so fierce, and their fury, so cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel.
All right. Yeah. I said 8 there, but 7 is fine. So, what are we expecting from the house of Levi?
Violence.
Yeah. What is this whole reference to? Simeon and Levi, weapons of violence are their swords. Let my soul not become in the council, because in their anger they killed men. When did that happen?
Do we not know?
Well, if you've been reading this story, earlier, Simeon and Levi have a little bout with a couple of men who come and take their sister Dinah. Remember that story? Right? You know what I'm talking about? Simeon and Levi, Dinah gets raped by I believe it's a Bethlehemite? Forget who it is who.
I remember the name.
They go off and they hatch this little plan to get revenge, they have them all circumcise themselves so that he might marry their sister, and while all of their men in the city are ailing from their circumcision, they come in and kill everyone.
That would suck.
It's a good plan.
So
It would work.
this is
It's smart though.
This is the violence that causes Jacob to disassociate himself from his sons, Simeon and Levi. Right? Their weapons are violence. Weapons of violence are their swords. My glory shall not be joined to their company. As in, the promise that's being passed down through me, of a seed, I'm not going to give it to him. He doesn't give it to Reuben because of his adultery with his maidservant Bilhah. He doesn't give it to Simeon and Levi because of the violence with their swords. You would think he wouldn't give it to Judah because of his whole thing with Tamar. That whole story. But remember what Judah says at the end. She is more righteous than I. She has saved me. She displays faith in this promise. So Judah is spared by Tamar. There's a fun little thing going on there.
A fun little thing.
Yeah.
Wink, wink.
So Simeon and Levi, we're not really looking for the seed from their descendants. Which presents us as the reader when we get to chapter 2. It's like, we're focusing in on a Levite and the son of a Levite. I wonder how this is going to play out. There's also another line in this curse. He shall be scattered among Jacob. You know what I mean? What's that a reference to, you think?
Oh, Levi, because the priests didn't have their own area, they lived in each area, in each tribe's area.
Yeah,
As the priests.
I think that's a very good possibility. The two that are in view here, Simeon and Levi. Levi gets scattered, literally. Like, he doesn't get any land when they take the land, right? The Levites, the priests, all go into other people's lands. He doesn't get an inheritance. Simeon gets enveloped by Judah. He's surrounded. He goes off with Judah, surrounded by Jacob. I think that might be what the reference is.
So one's dispersed and one's hemmed in.
Yeah. So this is what we're expecting from this house. You be with me so far? Like I said, we're going to go deep. Get every little piece out of it. Verse 2 is, I think, the most interesting verse in this whole section. So, the woman conceived and bore a son. This is a phrase that has been being repeated throughout this whole story over and over and over again, and it starts in chapter 3, verse 16 of Genesis. Let's go look at it.
3 what?
Chapter 3, verse 16. Right after the promise of a seed, you shall conceive in your sorrow. You have sorrow and conception. We talked about that while we were in Fredericksburg, right? And then chapter 4, verse 1, Adam knew his wife Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain. She says, I've gotten a man with the help of the Lord. It's repeated again when Abraham conceives, Hagar conceives Ishmael, and then Sarah conceives Isaac. She conceives and bears a son. Rebekah, when she has Jacob and Esau, she conceives and bears sons. Jacob, every time he has one of his 12 sons, it's Leah conceived and bore a son, Rachel conceived and bore a son, Bilhah conceived and bore a son. We're tracking this promise. Who's it being passed down to? Conceiving, bearing sons. Right back to Genesis 3:16. In its sorrow you shall conceive, your desire shall be for your man, and he shall rule over you. I think this all links together. It's one continuous story. So we get that phrase again. The woman conceived and bore a son. And she saw that he was tov. Now, ESV renders that. When she saw that he was a fine child. What do you guys have there?
'Twas a fine child.
He was beautiful, healthy.
She saw that he was beautiful, healthy. Is it literally, it's when she saw that he was good. Does that phrase ring a bell for you?
Yes. When God is looking down and
God created,
And it's good.
and it was good. He saw that it was good, and
Yeah,
he
that's
saw
what
that
I
it
was
was
saying.
good, and he saw that it was good. And then Eve sees that the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is good. She does what is right in her own eyes, as the book of Judges would say. we've got this repeated phrase, saw that it was good, saw that it was good. And whenever a human is seeing something as good in their own eyes as opposed to following the word of the Lord, you have this kind of dichotomy going on, marching through this story. Again, these are repeated phrases that I'm reading this with fresh eyes and seeing this all over the place. That really caught my eye. So what is the reader thinking so far of this baby?
It's a good baby.
It's that's continuing the promise
Some
of
importance.
Yeah, it's confusing because it's from Levi, but the woman sees that the baby is good, referencing God's view of things. So it's like
Yes.
it should just, if anything, just raise a question mark in your mind of what's the deal with this baby? What should we be expecting from him? Good or evil? Don't know yet.
Well, it should be evil. If back in Genesis, Genesis 49, the blessing that they're given
From
his
Levi,
line is
because
given.
so Levi, the fact that he's from Levi would lead us to believe, okay, maybe we're expecting something not so good from this baby.
Dispersal and
But then the woman saw that it was good is a reference to God's line, right? So it's like one on either side of the scales. Could go either way, yeah. So she saw that it was good, and she hid him for 3 months. And when she could hide him no longer, she grabbed a wicker. Everybody's book says basket, I'm assuming. Made of reeds. Again, it's like
mine says papyrus basket.
a papyrus basket. Okay, the word basket there is the word ark. It's in the same word for the thing that Noah built and the same thing that is of the covenant that they later built. And what does she do to this ark? Covers it in tar to waterproof it, much as Noah did with his ark. This is all Genesis language. This is all language pulling straight from the story to let you know we're picking back up. This story is marching along. And
Again, it's a Levite,
yeah,
which makes it still confusing.
makes you go, okay. And that's this whole book. You're kind of reading, and when you start reading this book with that in mind, and you read Moses goes off and God appears to him, and he's like not on board, you're like, okay, which way is this going to go? And he's marching along, and like he has his ups and he has his downs, and it's like Moses is this fraught character to the end. He strikes the rock, and God doesn't let him into the promised land, and yet he's the one that God gives. He's got this whole like divided nature about him. Yeah. Sure, let's think of it that way.
Turns out Moses is Anakin.
But so we got this reference to Genesis 6, and so I'm going to go on a slight tangent here.
And now another one.
Yeah,
You love those, Mies.
she covers the ark with pitch, waterproofing it, and puts the child in it among the reeds on the riverbank. Same thing that Noah's ark did, and what is the purpose of this?
To make it float.
To make it float, to keep one
Safe.
from the
Dry.
from drowning from the water. Yeah,
No water. The point is to no water.
safe from the water.
You said dry water.
She was answering my questions.
I was actually listening to Stephen.
Well, I was listening to your single words.
Well, yes, sir.
The word cover there, cover with pitch. You see it in Genesis 6 when Noah's building the ark. We see it here when she's covering the ark. We see it when they're building the Ark of the Covenant. You're covering it with gold. And we see it in Genesis 3 when man and woman sins. And in Genesis 4, and God says, I will make them a covering suitable for them. Right? Covers them with animal skins. This is atonement language. You guys know the word atonement, right? Literally covering. And Christ's atonement does what?
Covers our sins.
Covers our sins. Again, these thematic words that are marching along straight from Genesis 3 all throughout this story. This is an atonement reference. It covers the ark with pitch, thus making him safe. The kind of the old school way of talking about this would be to say that all of Scripture points to Jesus, right? And so we're noticing these ways that all of Scripture is pointing to Jesus. I'm not saying that this is what this is about. This is telling a story. It's giving you the facts. But it's doing it in such a way that directs you back to your Savior. That would be the classic Reformation way of reading the Bible, and I think it's the right way, largely. Particularly when you have the evidence within the text to say, look at these words that are cropping up over and over again. This is pointing us in a direction. So what she does, she puts the child into the ark, sets it in the reeds on the banks of the Nile. Notice the slight irony there. What did Pharaoh tell the Hebrew women to do?
Drown them.
Cast the babies in the Nile. And what does she do? She casts the baby in the Nile. But she gives it a covering.
I did what you told me to do.
She gives it a covering to keep it safe from death. Again, atonement idea. You have a covering that keeps you safe from death. Then verse 5 and 6. Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, while her young women walked beside the river, and saw the basket among the reeds, and sent her maid, and she brought it. Quick little, just like, make sure we're reading the text, not putting our picture of what happened onto the text. Did the basket move? No. She set it among the reeds, right? Imagine the Nile, it's got like reeds, kind of like in this picture, growing up. She set it among the reeds, as in like keeping the baby in one spot. She didn't throw the baby out in the water to drift downstream, hoping that God would keep it safe, kind of a thing. She was just hiding the baby.
Prince of Egypt lied to me.
Yeah, and so did every movie that's ever been made about the Moses story. We always have that dramatic scene where Moses' mother puts her in the basket and says, he's in God's hands, and then it just washes downstream.
But now,
That's not really what happened. And that's like not the worst thing in the world to get wrong, but we always want to have the correct picture. We want to be remembering what the text actually says, not what our pictures in the text say.
Would Pharaoh's daughter, I don't know, why would Pharaoh's daughter be bathing right by where all the,
Well, it didn't say she threw it next to her house. It just said that she put it.
It just says that she put it into the reeds on the Nile. So wherever that was, that's where Pharaoh's daughter went. And I'm not saying that God wasn't sovereignly protecting Moses or causing these events to occur. I would say he is the one who causes Pharaoh's daughter to walk along right where Moses is and finds the basket. This is all God's sovereign guiding hand.
And I'm sure Moses' mother was very intentional about where she placed it.
Yeah.
So, like I said, it's not like that's the worst thing in the world to have a picture of Moses' mother throwing him downstream. It's just not the correct picture. It doesn't reflect what the text says. So we want to have the more accurate picture in our minds. So she puts the basket into the reeds, leaves it there. Pharaoh's daughter comes to where that area is, notices the basket, tells her maid, go get it, opens it, and what does she see?
A baby.
A baby.
A Hebrew baby.
A Hebrew baby. She opened it and saw the child, and behold, the baby was crying. She, my ESV says, took pity on it. What does your translation say?
Had pity on him.
Had pity. Excuse me.
She felt sorry for him.
Felt sorry for it. That's NIV. What does Net say there?
felt compassion.
Felt compassion. There we go. I think that's the best translation. This is another one of those thematic words. Theological significance. The compassion of God is repeated over and over again, and the Pharaoh's daughter here has compassion on the people of God, the Hebrew baby. She's kind of set up in this archetypical place of authority, place of judgment, and she has compassion. Same way with when God passes before Moses and says, "My name, I am that I am. I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion." Same word. So she says, "This is one of Hebrews' children." Then his sister. So his sister, we learn later in the story, her name is Miriam. His sister says to Pharaoh's daughter, she's been watching over him. She says to Pharaoh's daughter, "Let me go grab one of the Hebrew women to nurse this child for you." Now, what does it mean to nurse a child?
Provide sustenance.
Provide sustenance. Breastfeed. Let me go get one of the Hebrew slave women to breastfeed this child for you, so you don't have to, Pharaoh's daughter, because
she wouldn't be able to.
She wouldn't be able to if she hasn't just had a kid. You with me? The processes that take place had not been activated. Okay. So she says, "Let me go call a woman to suck for you from the Hebrew woman, so that she may suckle the child for you." So what does Miriam do? She goes and gets the child's mother. Again, this is where you see the providential hand of God working. That all of these things happen so that the woman, we don't know Moses' mother's name, but she trusts God to keep her baby safe in the reeds, and ultimately gets to see her baby grow and keep him safe as he grows into being adulthood, basically, so that he may be adopted by Pharaoh's daughter. So the woman took the child, nursed him, and in the process, what does she get?
Her son.
Wages.
Oh.
She gets paid. I don't know why that's in there, but I think it's interesting.
Don't you just love getting paid to do things that you would want to do?
Yeah.
You would have done anyway.
Yeah.
That's great.
You could easily twist this and turn it into a prosperity gospel kind of thing. Look, she trusted God and she received both her son and
But that would be wrong.
money back. Yeah, that would be wrong. So I don't want to go that way with it for sure. But there is the fact that God does providentially cause this to occur, and she does get something out of it, quote unquote. Riches beyond compare, the kind of thing that awaits believers.
The other significant part of this is that Pharaoh is bringing a Hebrew into his household to take care of this boy.
Yeah.
Right? So she can be instilling Hebrew to him. Right?
So she is
what I'm
raising
saying,
him
like
as a Jew,
as
as a Hebrew.
It's significant that he hired a Hebrew
Yeah.
to come in and nurse a child in his household.
Right. Well, yeah, it's Pharaoh's daughter. Just to be clear, Pharaoh's daughter is the one hiring her.
But it's Pharaoh's household. That's what. But it says that. Yeah, but she's part of his household.
Yeah, Moses would
And
not.
her money comes from Pharaoh.
Yeah.
To pay her is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay, I'm with you.
But anyway.
But Pharaoh doesn't know about it, probably.
And Moses.
We don't know.
Pharaoh's daughter would not have gotten Moses' mother. Moses would have gone to live with his mother. It wouldn't be like his mother wouldn't go with him.
Yeah, it does say, "Take this child away and nurse him for me."
So
But she's still
growing up amongst the Hebrews.
the money's coming from Pharaoh.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is that? But I mean, I guess the point I'm making is that the Pharaoh's daughter is bringing a Hebrew in to nurse.
Yeah.
The Hebrew.
Yeah.
Which she could have gone and found an Egyptian woman to do the same.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, God is providentially again giving Moses a firm upbringing
only
in
because
his
of Miriam's
Hebrewness.
suggestion.
Yeah.
That she convinced her
to do it.
Right.
I have a question. And talking about how his mother was getting wages, it reminds me, where's the dad in all of this? Like, why isn't, I mean, he's probably slaving away or whatever, but slaves they're slaves because they're working without pay, right? And so that's weird.
It's just overall.
Yeah, the only mention we have of the dad is verse 1. A Levite man took a Levite woman and made a baby with her.
It also, like, it's kind of weird. Like, I doubt that it was normal for a slave girl to talk to the daughter of Pharaoh. Like, that just doesn't seem like it was a normal occurrence, you know? I don't know.
Yeah, that's possible.
It's just all kind of shrouded in weirdness. Like,
Yeah, it's definitely
God's just like
a unique occurrence.
Yeah.
One might say a providential.
No.
So the woman took the child, nursed him, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son, and she named him Moshe because from the water I mashad him. His name means to draw out.
Which he would also do later. But she didn't know that.
What's the significance of Pharaoh's daughter naming? What is the significance of Pharaoh's daughter's naming of Moses?
Coming out of the water, but it's also going to be coming out of Egypt.
And so there's one big significant thing that Moses' daughter means I will draw out, and what does Moses do? He
Took people out of Egypt.
He draws the people out of Egypt. Yeah. So
What?
he leads the Exodus.
Were you guys saying?
That's one major thing. What's the second major thing about
But I said-
Pharaoh's daughter's naming of Moses?
I was gonna say she's kind of like drawing. He might have grown up with the Hebrews, but she's kind of drawing away from.
Yeah, there you go. So she's drawing him away from his people. You're real close to what I was. She's essentially staking claim. When you name something, you are indicating ownership of it. Again, we see this right back in Genesis chapter 2. God gives Adam the land to Adam to serve, and he tells Adam, name the creatures, thus establishing a hierarchy. So Pharaoh's daughter is drawing him away from his people or laying claim. We're still getting this kind of divided, like, which way is this Moses character going to go? We don't know yet.
And is Moshe, isn't that a Hebrew name too, instead of an Egyptian name?
So yeah, there's debate about that. There's debate about what. Definitely, there is a Hebrew word Moshe that obviously sounds a whole lot like Moshe. It might be that this is a Hebrew translation of an Egyptian name that means to draw out. It might be that the Pharaoh's daughter actually gives him a Hebrew name.
Sounds like you're saying mushy. And she named him Mushy.
He's the only one who.
Josh, it can be mushy with the French. No. Mushy.
Not.
So we understand what happened in this little, as I call it, vignette, tiny little story. What's the basic salvation arc here? The hint. Arc. That's the salvation
Oh my
arc.
gosh, stop it!
Anyway, we're focused.
Salvation arc.
Trust is
I'm with
placed in
you.
God, and salvation is because of it.
There you go. You got a really clear atonement language with the arc in which someone is placed for safety, for salvation from the peril that is put before them. Now let's ask some questions. Application. First of all, why is this little story here? What is it? How does it connect what came before with what comes after? Why did Moses have to write this section in this book? What does it add to the story?
Well, it kind of connects. It's key because that's the beginning of Moses, who ends up taking the Exodus.
So why couldn't you just start with Moses when he's 40 and killing the Egyptian?
Origin
It
story.
shows that God was with him from the beginning.
There you go. Yeah. It also accounts for why he bothered killing the Egyptian. He feels some sort of kinship with the Hebrew that raised him. He knows he's a Hebrew, being raised in Pharaoh's household.
It gives you context,
Gives you context.
so you actually understand what's going on.
Good.
It's much more significance. We can see God's sovereignty because of Moses would not have had such power, not power, but such a he wouldn't have been able to stand in front of Pharaoh and have an audience with him whenever he was trying to convince Pharaoh to let my people go. So I think because he was raised in Pharaoh's household, he felt like, I mean, I know he said, I have speech impediment or whatever, I can't do this. But
Had influenza.
yes, thank you. You said it in 3 words that took me 20 at least.
No, you didn't even finish.
Shut up.
What'd you say?
He had influence.
He had influence. Okay.
But I said influenza.
You did say influence?
That's a knee slapper.
I didn't hear that.
I missed my knee there.
I said influenza first time.
That's not gonna be suffering.
I would have agreed with you.
You didn't
I
agree with me when I said influenza.
I agree that that's a possibility. I don't know how heavy I would lean on that, just because we don't know anything about. We don't know too much about why he's allowed in Pharaoh's household and why he gets an audience. It just says they went and they saw Pharaoh.
So you're wrong.
No, because, well, like you said, a slave would not have spoken to Pharaoh's daughter.
Yes, but that's, yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
Well, that's what. So,
you're right.
so I want to challenge both of those, and I'm not saying you're necessarily wrong.
He's just saying you're wrong. It's okay.
But always question your presuppositions. How do we know that a slave wouldn't talk to Pharaoh's daughter?
I don't know. I just said it seemed weird.
Well,
How do we know that Moses
thinking
wouldn't have
back
had
to,
access
like,
to Pharaoh without having?
thinking
grown
to
up
like
in Pharaoh's
medieval
household?
times or whatever, like in the
Because
Middle
the
Ages,
Hebrews were
servants don't talk to kings.
Okay.
So I don't. You're drawing off
Unless they're
of
spoken.
information
And the
that you
Hebrews
already
were hated.
know. Yeah. They're seen as slaves, and slaves, people in lower positions aren't typically invited to talk to people in higher positions, especially coming from the lowest, going to near the top. That doesn't mix.
Okay. So you're saying it's a fair assumption because of just how
It's a
social
cultural.
social hierarchies tend to
Yeah.
work in every culture.
Yeah.
There would probably be some there too.
Like, I know my slaves don't talk
So, to answer the question, because every other person whom the promise of the seed is followed through is, they started with the birth.
There's another.
So
Okay.
starting with that language kind of clues you into where the promise of the seed is going.
Yeah, it lets you know we're picking up this story about the promised seed, and we're not. Be clear, we're not necessarily saying it's coming to this guy, but it's somebody to keep your eye on. Is this well? The way you know it's passed down from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob is because you have clear repetitive things where Abraham blesses Isaac and tells him, or God appears to Isaac and says the exact same promise to him that he said to Abraham. Same thing to Jacob. God appears to him and says, I will give you the land and seed, the blessing, etc. And we're following the nation as a whole, and this guy in particular as, we don't know what yet, we're going to find out later, okay, leader of this nation. Unless you do. And you have to keep reading the story. And it's a long story.
You know, here's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
Not if, because we know Moses was from the family of Levi. So Levi's, they weren't the priests though, were they?
Yeah.
They were the priests? Okay.
No, well, not here yet.
No, I know, but, okay, so.
But they are, once Moses gets the law.
So that's interesting, we don't need a priest. Jesus is our high priest, but it's almost as if the priest saved and Jesus is our high priest, and so.
Yeah. Good point.
Cameron, that's not what
I agree with that, yeah.
I never thought about it before.
I like that.